Hey guys, Untitled Tiger here, and I am bringing you another episode of History Lessons, and this is a game of Black Ops. I'm not sure what's playing in the background right now because I'm just going to do this commentary, and then I'm going to kind of have to put in the pictures, and this is going to be a little different because I want to put pictures and stuff in here to illustrate some of the stuff, and this is quite a passionate subject for me. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is, I know I said I wasn't going to be putting a video out till Thursday, but I'm really kind of fired up for this commentary. Yesterday I noticed a commentary, I think it was on Hubbit Gaming or Hubbit Community Channel, and it was a gentleman who was in Japan, lives in Japan, and he went through and he survived, I guess if you want to say it. He lived through the earthquake, and he was giving his perspective on it. And if you know the video I'm talking about, then you probably have read through some of the comments like I did. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there were a lot of people who were making comments like, that's what Japan gets for attacking Pearl Harbor. And of course, people were rebutting that with, well, the atomic attacks on Japan were what Japan received in retaliation from the United States as a consequence of their attack on Pearl Harbor. Now, what I'm going to do right now is trying to be brief. I got a lot of notes in front of me, a history lesson of what led up to the atomic attacks, and I'm going to dispel some myths that the atomic attacks on Pearl Harbor were not a direct result of the attacks on Pearl Harbor. Now, I'm going to bring you guys through this. So there's sort of this widespread belief that the atomic attacks were this attack, or this sort of retaliatory attack, but I mean, they happened 4 years after the fact, and it's just not the case. Now, we're going to start off with Pearl Harbor itself. Now, on December 7th, 1941, we all know Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. They also attacked the Philippines at the same time. Except for the people in the Philippines, it was past the date, the date line, so it was December the 8th. Now, there was 3,700 casualties in Pearl Harbor. So that's killed in action, wounded, and missing. So that's a lot of people. Now, the reason why people assume is because they don't assume that the atomic attacks were a direct result of Pearl Harbor, is because they don't understand the things that happened in between 1941 to 1945 in August when we dropped the bombs. In April of 1942, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle, you guys have probably heard about this before, the Doolittle raids. What he did is he took 16 B-25s, they're Army Air Corps B-25s, they're about the light bombers, light, medium, and heavy bombers. They're not big, but they're not small by any means. So he took these B-25 Mitchell bombers, he put them on the USS Hornet, which is a Navy aircraft carrier, and there was like 80 crew members on this mission, and it was pretty much a one-way mission. They gassed them up, they put bombs in them, they launched them from the USS Hornet, and they attacked Tokyo, or well, at least Honshu, the main island of Japan, on April 18th, 1942. That was a retaliatory attack on the homeland of Japan by the United States. That is the direct retaliatory attack that we did. There was no strategic impact based upon the bombing. It didn't have any impact on their ability to make war, but it was a moral victory for the country. We needed that moral victory, and it showed Japan that we can reach out and we could touch them just like they did. So it was a moral victory. Now, I'm going to show you some pictures here. If I haven't already, you'll see Jimmy Doolittle. It's him and the survivors from his crew, some of the other pilots, and next to these Chinese people who picked him up. And then there's him putting this Japanese medal on this bomb, sort of a symbolic like return to sender sort of a deal. And then you'll see the B-25s taken off from the aircraft carrier. Now, here's another thing to think about when you think about the retaliatory attacks. If you want to say that the atomic weapons were a retaliatory attack to Pearl Harbor, we also firebombed the crap out of Japan. Starting in November 17th, 1944 until August 15th, 1945. So you've got almost a year of firebombing. We firebombed 64 Japanese cities. And this was sort of the brainchild of this gentleman called General Curtis LeMay. He's sort of he was one of the big Army Air Corps generals, and he handled the Pacific Theater of Operations. Now, the most destructive part of our firebombings of Japan came in March the 9th and 10th of 1944. We firebombed the crap out of Tokyo, and approximately 1,000 people were killed. Now, this is a figure that both the United States and Japan kind of agreed upon separately, and there's two reasons. Well, there's a reason. Each party has their own reason for agreeing. That's a really low figure considering the amount of the population density of that area, which was there was about 1.5 million people who lived in the burned out area of Tokyo. And according to the research that I found, or the research that I did, the information that I found, there was somewhere between 103,000 to 135,000 people per square mile in Tokyo that we bombed. So to say 100,000 people died out of a population density of 103 to 135,000 per square mile is kind of ridiculous. I think a lot more people died. But here's the reasons why the death toll was minimized. From the United States standpoint, it's a war crime to attack civilians, to directly attack civilians. So to go after civilians is really a no-no in warfare. I mean, with the daylight bombings and the inaccuracy of weapons in that point, to bomb a factory that was surrounded by schools and hospitals and buildings and residential areas, it's just sort of, that's going to happen. But to directly attack a city like the Germans did on London and the United States did on Tokyo, it's kind of a no-no. So the United States is going to make sure that they're going to put the lowest death toll possible, which is about 100,000. Now, the Japanese side, what they're doing is they don't want to claim more deaths because they don't want the United States to know that their firebombing is effective. So they have an incentive to keep it low, to make it sound as if, yes, you're bombing the crap out of us, you're burning up our buildings, but nobody's dying. It's a waste of money. So there's sort of incentive on both sides. Now, we've all probably heard about the Manhattan Project. And this is why my main argument about the fact that the atomic bombs were not retaliatory attack is because the atomic weapons themselves were untested. The Manhattan Project detonated one test implosion type bomb at the White Sands Proving Grounds in New Mexico. It was called Operation Trinity, or just Trinity. And it was the first atomic test, and you'll see some pictures of the atomic blast and the crater and everything. Now, when you get into August, when we're dropping these bombs, the implosion type bomb that we tested in White Sands is actually the bomb we dropped on Nagasaki. The first bomb that we dropped on Hiroshima, or Hiroshima, however you pronounce it, that did the most damage. That was 90,000 to 166,000 killed in action from what's called Little Boy, and it was a gun-style bomb. Basically, there was a bullet, kind of like a barrel, and then a plutonium target, and you're trying to shoot these two objects in there with an explosion to cause a nuclear reaction, chain reaction. That was an untested style of weapon. It was, it was one of two different designs that they came up with. The implosion type was plutonium surrounded by explosives, and that were timed explosives that would cause a chain reaction within the bomb itself. And then, of course, we have Fat Man, which is the implosion style bomb that had been tested just once, and that was dropped on Nagasaki. So together, you've got 240,000 people killed and 2 bombs dropped. I mean, that's terrible, terrible losses. But when you're thinking about the firebombing, we don't really know how many people died in the firebombing. So from what I've heard before, I can't claim it with the research I went and did quickly today, but I've heard before the firebombings of Japan, especially Tokyo, killed more people than both of the bombs combined. So I know that people say, oh my god, it's so bad that we dropped those atomic bombs, but they killed less people. Then again, you have to worry, and then there's the whole thing about radiation fallout and long-term effects, and then there's people who are sterile or give birth to babies that have birth defects, and so I mean there's a lot more ramifications. So you could say upwards of 300,000 people who died because of the atomic attacks. Now, the meat and potatoes of my argument is basically this. One, the weapon systems were untested. So you can't say that those bombs were meant as a retaliation for Pearl Harbor because they're untested. There was no certainty that those bombs were going to work. Now, what we did do, and the reason why we dropped those bombs, is because we wanted an unconditional surrender from Japan. So basically, they wanted to come to terms. We weren't, because of Pearl Harbor. Now this is where it gets to be kind of a gray area. Because of Pearl Harbor, we were aiming for unconditional surrender. We would not accept anything but unconditional surrender. So we had planned to invade Japan, and that's called Operation Downfall. Now that was slated to begin, Operation Olympic was slated to begin November 1st, 1945, and that is the planned invasion of the southernmost island called Kyushu, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't speak Japanese, so I don't really know. And then the secondary part of that operation is Operation Coronet, which was to take place March 1st, 1946, which was the planned invasion of Honshu, which is the main island which contains Tokyo. Now, depending on who you talk to, because there's several people who made estimates, anywhere from 1.2 million casualties to upwards of 4 million U.S. casualties. I mean, this is including aircrew, this is including seaborne troops and seamen on aircraft carriers, because they expected kamikazes, they expected people to be defending their homeland. It would be like as if someone invaded our country, and I know I would grab my rifle and I would defend my country. I would shoot at whomever is attacking our country, and that's just, I think most Americans would do that. I'm not saying that's the reason why we have the right to bear arms, but if you think of, say, like Lexington and Concord, the British tried to come in and take our weapons, and we fought them the entire way. And so it would be sort of the same thing. Of course we've got redundancy systems with say National Guards, and anyways, I'm not going to get into that. I can talk about theoretical, like how bad it would be to try to invade this country, because it would be a nightmare if you want to invade the United States. So anyways, you have this projected 1.2 million to 4 million casualties on the US side alone. This is not counting Japanese casualties, which would probably be astronomical by comparison, with the projection of, if it's a 1.2 million casualties, you've got about 267,000 U.S. servicemen dying. Those are the killed in action, 267,000. So, the reasons for the atomic warfare, it's to obtain the unconditional surrender that President Roosevelt and then President Truman, after Roosevelt passed away, they wanted that unconditional surrender from Japan, because this does go back to Pearl Harbor, because of the attack on Pearl Harbor. They would not accept anything but unconditional surrender. And another reason, which sounds sort of sadistic, is they wanted two things. They wanted to test these weapon systems that they developed, because they spent millions of dollars. I don't know if it was $1 billion. That's a lot of money for the 1940s. They spent millions of dollars at least, and they wanted to make sure these damn things worked. So then when they dropped one bomb, they were at this sort of impasse. Like, okay, we warned them, and that was another thing. President Truman warned the Japanese if they did not unconditionally surrender, they were going to drop a bomb that the world has never seen before. And we did. We went through with what we were saying, because we wanted to see if it worked. We wanted to test it. And at the White Sands Proving Grounds, when the first, the Trinity bomb exploded, Robert Oppenheimer, there's a very famous thing where he talks about how people cried, some people were silent, some people cheered. And then he goes in and talks about the Indian Bhagavad Gita, I think it is, about how he's like, I am death, destroyer of worlds, and he was pretty much taken aback by this thing he created, the atomic weapon. He did not imagine in a million years that he was going to produce something so destructive. Now, going back to what I was saying about the bombs, we wanted to drop the bomb, prove that we would drop the bomb. And the second one is we wanted to do it again, to make sure the Japanese knew we weren't bluffing, and to test out this bomb as well, because it had only been tested once before. So it was sort of, God, I don't want to say it was like a trial period, but I mean, these are untested weapon systems, as I said before. So these need to be tested, and we need this unconditional surrender, because we don't want to invade the home islands of Japan. It is going to be a very bloody conflict. And so a lesser known fact is there was actually a third bomb on its way. I believe it was to Okinawa. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the island they jumped off from. So anyways, I was spacing on the island they jumped off from. But anyways, there was a third bomb on its way to be dropped by the end of August if the unconditional surrender did not come. And of course, we know that it did come. So if you just want to reiterate this, I'm going to reiterate this for you guys. The reason the bombings of Pearl Harbor are not the bombings, the atomic attack on Japan, are not a direct result of Pearl Harbor. That would say that the Doolittle raid was not a retaliatory attack. That would say the war itself meant nothing, because that's the reason why we went to war with Japan. We didn't just go to war with Japan because we just wanted to take Japan or something. We went to war because they attacked us. So that would say that all those guys died for no reason, to say that the only reason why those bombs were dropped was to get back at them for Pearl Harbor. It's nonsense. So of course, it's all these people who don't understand history, who don't know history, and don't know the complexities of that Second World War, who are saying this. And of course, it's probably just a bunch of jackasses and trolls and stuff saying it, but it's still I mean, it's a controversial topic to today. I mean, I've interviewed, in the past couple of years, I've interviewed 20 plus World War II veterans, and I'll ask them about the atomic bomb, and they'll all tell me it was the right thing to do at the time. We're looking back at hindsight, so of course we're going to judge this from a moral standpoint, but at the time, when you consider the fact that those bombs killed 240 to 300,000 people, that's not a lot compared to the millions of lives that could have been lost. So yes, the argument is we killed a lot of people, but we saved a lot of lives, not only American lives, but Japanese lives and probably British lives and Russian lives. It would have been a very, very bloody conflict. And on a personal note, my grandfather was slated, being the fact that he was drafted in 1945, and he was heading to the Pacific, and he would have been one of those guys who would have invaded Japan. And I don't know if I would have been here. I don't know if I'd be here. I don't know if he would have died or been wounded or something. I don't know. The world would be a far different place if we did invade Japan. But anyways, guys, I hope you guys learned something from this. I got a lot of notes here, and so I hope I covered everything I want. I'm going to listen to this before I post it up and make sure it's all good. But yeah, I want to make sure to get this out there. Please don't be ignorant about these things. If you see people being ignorant, I mean, you can't change those people. I mean, you're going to get into a war, back and forth conflict about, who did what. I mean, I had a guy send me a PM, and he said he was a college student, and he's been learning about this, and I wrote him very long messages back. It's like, hey, look, it's not as simple as that. It's very complex. And I outlined, that's when I really started getting the idea of this, doing this commentary, is I really outlined what I wanted to say, because I sent him this message, and I started putting the stuff in my text edit, and the next thing you know, I've got a page of notes to go over, and then I went and found pictures and stuff. So anyways, guys, I hope you like this, and I really want to get back on to doing more history commentaries like this, especially with Vietnam. However, I'm not as knowledgeable about Vietnam as I am about World War II, so it's just sort of a passion of mine. But anyways, you guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Hope I'm not running over. I guess I can just throw another video in there, and I will talk to you as soon as I'm done with my paper, which I need to actually get started on this thing. We're finishing it right now, so you guys take it easy. Later.